People love categories. It's kind of our whole thing. Think about how many subgenres there are in horror movies. Um, so many different ways that you're allowed to scare people enough that they drop their popcorn. And if people are that specific about scary movies, think about how specific they are about other parts of humanity, especially the parts that pertain to hot button topics like how people love to push against progress in the queer community, say that we're making things up and creating micro labels when we shouldn't even be caring so much about the labels we're dividing. But gravity existed before that apple dropped. Oxygen existed before we took a breath. Just because we can understand and explain something doesn't mean we discovered it. In one of my favorite movies of all time, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the protagonist asks the woman she loves such a powerful question. Do all lovers feel like they're inventing something? I think they do. I think that every young person that kisses another person thinks they've discovered something new, something revolutionary. But they kiss more people and realize that love is a language so diverse and so beautiful and a tale as old as time. And that fabric unites us. And it's always been diverse. We just didn't have the understanding to comprehend all of its beauty. I'm so proud of my mother for coming forward and telling us about the journey of love in the middle. And as she can tell you, it starts young.
My friends and I played with Barbies in our youth. Their Barbies always fell in love with Ken. Mine did as well, sometimes. I have clear memories of playing out different scenarios concerning Barbie's romantic future. Sometimes she fell in love with Ken, and sometimes she fell in love with Barbie. Each time was different. In these hours of play, I found that those around me who picked up pieces and parts of my Barbie story asked questions like, how will Barbie have a family if she falls in love with a girl? I remember thinking long and hard about that an answer to that question and got very excited and with a huge smile on my face when I told my mother that if Barbie wanted to have children, she could adopt them. If she didn't want children, then she wouldn't adopt. All that really mattered was that Barbie was happy. And if another Barbie made her happier than Ken would, she should spend her life with Barbie. As an adult, I think over people's reactions to my Barbies marrying. It took me a long time to realize that it was okay to fall in love, no matter the sex of the person, and that it was okay to not fall in love at all. The real point was to seek out a path that fuels fulfillment, to spread beauty in the world. Such a path is simply not possible if I aspire to another's beliefs concerning who I love. This is something I am aware of now, but to arrive to that realization took years and years of disheartening pain and utter confusion.
My mom is definitely not alone in that experience. Scientifically speaking, study of development of sexual and gender identity in youth is an incredibly new field. And it makes sense because we historically have conceived that youth are unable to conceptualize these complicated topics that are difficult for even adults to understand. But with our increasing understanding of what sexuality is and how it's an integral part of identity, it's pretty clear to see that you don't suddenly become gay at 23. You're gay the whole time. And with this understanding, we are seeing that with further acceptance of queerness by society, that these ages that people are realizing are becoming younger and younger these days, according to studies as early as 9 and 10. Yet we still have this idea that young people cannot conceptualize something as complicated as gender and sexuality. And I'm not going to try and argue that an average 5-year-old could present a thesis on the complexities of non binary identity in a binary world. But I will say that just because we don't have the words to express something doesn't mean we're not experiencing it. I had my first feelings for a girl long before I understood what I was feeling. We know something a lot of the time. We just don't know what we know. An often integral facet of our personality is shut down in so many moments with boys aren't supposed to do that and no, those girls are just very close friends. So we push it down.
At 16 years old, I fell in love with Lynn Miller. She had brown hair and chocolate colored eyes. She smelled like summer, was kind, intelligent, and had such a beautiful soul. I did not understand that it was okay to feel that way about Lynn. I thought something was wrong with me. I'd lost the fearless thought process that I had when I played with those Barbie dolls. And hours upon hours of confiding in one another, she told me about a boy she had a crush on. I squished the feelings I held for her deep, deep down and set her up on a date with him. They eventually went to prom together. I believed that just because something was wrong with me did not mean that a soul as amazing as Lynn's should be denied. I suspect that she knew how I felt about her. One day she suddenly stopped talking to me altogether. Yet again, the idea that something was wrong with me was reinforced. I told myself Lynn knows that something is foul inside of me, and it scared her. I lost my best friend that day. And those thoughts and feelings remained squashed down for a long time to come. I now understand that what I experienced is called compulsory heterosexuality.
Compulsory heterosexuality. The bane of my existence is perfectly encapsulated by author Cheyenne M. Davis when she described it as the notion that heterosexuality is the only valid sexuality and that everyone else should be/is expected to be straight. In layman's terms, it's this assumption that the baseline in terms of sexuality is being straight, and people are assumed to be straight unless they say or do something that shows otherwise. In less kind terms, I sometimes say it's straight until proven queer, like a play on innocent until proven guilty. Everything about our society shuffles people along to the nuclear family ideal. It's everywhere. It's telling a young girl that she's beautiful by telling her that one day you're going to have to beat boys down with a stick. It's the onesies for baby boys that say lady killer. Spoiler alert, that boy is not a lady killer. He's a lot more focused on making sure he gets food on time. And it's pervasive throughout a person's lifetime. Unless a person is talking about it, when you ask a person who they have a crush on, you're typically using the pronoun that would be perceived as the gender opposite of that person, which, side note, is also invalidating of non binary existence. And we're fed this narrative that husbands see their wives as the ball and chain, and that women are supposed to resent their husbands, that sex is not really an enjoyable act for about half of the heterosexual population. And of course, people are going to be confused. None of it sounds fun. But to heterosexual people, the downsides aren't universal. People are people. Man is not glued to football on screen. Woman is not constantly nagging about chores. But to a queer person, we're told we're supposed to be miserable. And it's just the way things are. It's no surprise that it typically takes people a while to realize that something is missing. Our society is so fundamentally straight by default that any other perception is radical. A common reason I see used when criticizing people for not realizing that they're queer earlier is, well, the internet exists. But in a compulsory heterosexual world, how does someone even know what to Google? And wouldn't the result just be memes about the cake toppers where the woman is dragging the man who looks miserable? We don't know what we know, and we often don't know where to start. When all you know are stereotypes and slurs, you tend to think you don't qualify. It is, at its very root, compulsory heterosexuality that my mother was engulfed in as she was choosing her path in life.
And so over the years, I grew up, got married, and began raising my own children. I fit into the box that society upheld as normal, as acceptable, a box that, although in many ways fulfilling, did not quite fit. About 5 years into my marriage, memories of Lynn began flooding back. I had pushed them down so far, convinced that the path I sought for joy and fulfillment would be obstructed by the thoughts or desires for a soulmate who may not be male. I was lost. Depression was standard for me. I felt wrong. But gradually, I began to realize that love is not wrong. Yet still, it seemed as if in the most unlikely of places I was met with anger, judgment, and disbelief.
The first mention of bisexuality was in a book in 1886 by Richard Freiherr von Krafft-Ebing. Unfortunately, hinted by the title being Psychopathia Sexualis, it was a description of bisexuality as a type of sexual pathology. The trend continued in psychology for the next few decades, documentation written through the lens of condemnation. Considering the political climate at the time, I doubt any of you are surprised. What may surprise you, however, was that bisexuality was stigmatized in the queer liberation movement. Time and Newsweek spoke of bisexual chic in the 90s, which put it on the map and gave everyone the ammo to denigrate. It was referred to as a phase, like it was silly bands or bell bottoms. Brenda Howard, the organizer of the first Pride Parade, was bisexual. Freddie Mercury spoke about his relationships with both men and women, but is seen as a gay icon, not a bisexual one. People in the community today may still think that Lady Gaga is an ally instead of the bisexual woman that she is. But these presumptions don't just apply to celebrities and activists. It happened to people like my mother in places that should have felt safe.
In college, I took a biohuman sexuality class. About halfway through the course, we had guest speakers. One of those speakers sat before the class and explained that her loving a woman was completely okay, that she had felt this way about potential mates as far back as she could remember. Then the subject of bisexuality arose. She explained that those who believe that they are bisexual are fence sitters, stating that they were either confused or experimenting. I raised my hand and jumped right out of the closet publicly in that very moment, telling her in no uncertain terms that as a child I could have fallen in love with Barbie or Ken, and assuring her that bisexuality is real and that I had also felt this way for as far back as I can remember. She scoffed. I did not squish it down this time. Love, in and of itself, is pure. Nobody could tell me who to love. It was not something that could be boxed into another person's beliefs. It just was and simply is. The beauty of love itself is darkened each and every time an LGBTQIA plus soul is told that who they love is wrong.
The prejudice, discrimination, and stigma my mother experienced at the age of 16 and the years following imbued a fear based upon an expectation of rejection. She literally had to hide who she was in the hopes of some sort of acceptance. The term for that experience is minority stress. Hiding who you are leads to emotional difficulties that are a struggle to put into words. She's described it as a bit like wearing a pair of jeans that are a size or two too small. It cuts off emotional circulation. Though she and I walk different paths, I can relate to parts of that. And that hate comes from all sides. Unfortunately, the call is coming from inside the house a lot of the time. There is something so uniquely horrible about having someone that's a part of your own community invalidate your identity. In a battle that we're supposed to be in together, to have not so friendly fire happen, it's so disheartening. I hate that fellow lesbians will unironically use the phrase gold star lesbian, which means a woman who's never had sex with a man. Although the label is used for lesbians, the biphobic connotations are clear. It perpetuates the idea that having sex with a man makes you less queer. That kind of insidious prejudice persists in a lot of queer circles. I like to hope that it's slowly getting better, but it's unfortunately normal for a bisexual person to be told that they're indecisive or greedy. The typical narrative is that bisexual men are actually gay and that bisexual women are actually straight. Funny how both of those mean you end up with a man. I wonder why that is. There's also harmful narratives that hypersexualize them and paint them to be unfaithful in relationships. The gender of the person that you're capable of falling in love with does not dictate what kind of person you are. But stereotypes exist. Not accepted by heteronormative society, not accepted by fellow queer people. It's a prejudice that puts people at risk. Bisexual women are nearly twice as likely to experience sexual violence as heterosexual women. and the rate is higher for men as well. In addition to that, recent findings show that up to 85% of bi youth usually feel worried, nervous, or panicked, while 81% usually feel depressed. The numbers are alarming, but not surprising.
In the midst of my foggy bewilderment around this time in my life, I sought out counseling. My counselor told me in no uncertain terms, "You are just confused." She proceeded to increase my number of appointments to help me work through my confusion. I responded by canceling all future appointments and finding another counselor. The first friend I told responded with a very vulgar reference that is inappropriate to share here today. Finally, it had happened. A personal friend responded with the same venom strangers had. She didn't sneak around the subject politely asking questions, she just attacked. My response dripped with sarcasm, so much so that the whole room went silent. Because, as Christina Marrero wrote, one had to be willing to fight in order for a love story to last a lifetime. So I fight, and I give in to love itself, refusing to squish myself back into the box so many in our society wanted me to remain in. I fight because the love I am meant to experience cannot thrive in an atmosphere of fear or hate. I do not fight because I am a bisexual woman. I fight because love is love is love. In fact, I no longer identify as a bisexual woman. And I cannot recall the very moment that changed for me. There were not alarms that went off in my head. It was nothing like those turbulent teen years where I struggled to understand what I was feeling within the confines of a society that negated such love. It was a quiet alteration, muttering throughout my being of that sexual spectrum so many had written about in the past. One day, the label bisexual no longer felt like it fit. I found myself realizing that I loved people deeply and even had romantic feelings for them without a desire to even have sexual relations with them. It was their soul, not their sex, that I desired to connect with. There is a fluidity in sexuality. I have come to realize that I am, in the very essence of my being, a pansexual woman. That has changed for me. And please understand that this is only reflective of my personal journey. I have found that my attraction is relative to a person's soul rather than their sex. Just a desire to sort of connect energies. I believe author Daniel Waters said it best in his op ed titled The Real Differences Between Bisexual and Pansexual, when he wrote that the simplest distinction between the two is that being bisexual means that gender impacts attraction, while it does not for a pansexual person.
I feel grateful that I got to grow up in a time where so much has changed for the community. We have come so far, but we've only come so far because people decided that enough was enough, that we deserved better. I think we do that a disservice when we decide that certain people are too different to fit in with the different people. Pansexuality doesn't dilute the strength of our message. Neither does bisexuality. We can only be as successful as the most marginalized among us. When we uplift those in the community that face intercommunity prejudice, we uplift everyone. We don't succeed by fracturing. We simply undermine everything that people have fought for. I believe too much in the LGBTQIA plus community to let our own fears dictate who we choose to accept. Stonewall didn't happen because of fear. Marriage equality didn't happen because of fear. It was bravery and an understanding that true progress takes time. New labels are overwhelming and may feel unnecessary. But this is just the beginning. We haven't had the chance to fully understand queerness yet. And what a beautiful blooming it will be. I will do everything I can to watch it happen and protect those that make our community so beautiful. Bigots don't stop to ask what kind of queer you are before they choose whether or not to hate you. So why do we stop to ask what kind of queer someone is before we choose whether or not to support them? I choose to fight for our rights.
I fight because I was not the only soul that needed acceptance, love, validation, and support. Because the emotional turmoil seemed unending. And although I struggled for years, by speaking up, others may not have to struggle just quite as much as I did. And so I stand, or rather sit, before you today as an adult who reconnected with that inner child who knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that her Barbie and she herself were always okay. That who she falls in love with is not limited by the often narrow definition that society ascribes to love. That every time someone makes a dismissive comment to a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, pains are being inflicted that may take decades to heal, if ever. I fight because every single time gender and sexuality is reinforced based on restrictive societal beliefs, more souls are darkened, more souls are harmed. Every time straight or cisgender is treated as the norm, hurt is being caused. Because, as Kevin Kidwell so eloquently shared, if I could have chosen to be gay or straight, I think I would have simply chosen to be happy. Because, like the pure, untouched perception of the child I was so long ago, I know now that my Barbie can love again. Love purely the soul of another, regardless of their sex. Although I will never stop speaking up for the equality of each member of the LGBTQIA plus community, I do not fight a battle within myself concerning my sexuality any longer. I simply am. I will love who I love, and nobody will change that. It took a very long time, though, years of self flagellation to come to this deep realization. Love is pure, and it is human perception that colors it. That said perception of another cannot touch me, and I did not fully realize who I was until I let go of who I was not. I will continue to fight because, as Edith Wharton said, there are two ways of spreading light: to be a candle or a mirror that reflects it. At 16, I needed a candle, so now I aim to be the mirror that reflects the light for others.
I have often heard many times over the years that there is a frustration around the idea that queer people need to come out of the closet, a frustration with the need to make a big deal out of one aspect of who you are. I think this sermon shows that the queer people of today and recent history did not create something new, nor did we create the closet.
All we did was find a word for the light that lives inside of us. Bisexuality Visibility Day is coming up. Some of you may connect with that label, some may not. Wherever you are in your learning and sexuality journey, you're valid. It's all about learning and growing. And as everyone here this morning knows, Unitarian Universalists always strive to continue to learn and grow.
So, as we leave you on this beautiful and offensively hot September morning, I encourage you to think about all the beauty that bisexuals and pansexuals have brought into this world. Let's celebrate them as carriers of growth in the beautiful kaleidoscope world we get to live in.
Thank you for sharing this journeys with us this morning, my beautiful kaleidoscopic mosaic and brethren. Amen.
And blessed be.